Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a good weekend. It was hot, very hot in LA. Felt like summertime, and I got to tell you, I'm probably one of the few people to say that I am not ready for summer. But it absolutely felt like summertime. So, anyway, what I've been talking about for the last several weeks are all pieces of a presentation that I have called the 5 Pillars of Health. And it started off with an explanation as to why it is from an evolutionary perspective that we struggle with our health and wellness habits. And then I went into 5 keys to success when it comes to changing your behavior, when it comes to healthy habits. And then I talked about an overview of all of the 5 pillars of health. And they are Eat, Move, Recover, Play, Connect. What's up, Ryan? Good to see you, man. And so today what I'm going to begin to do over the next several weeks is take one of those pillars of health and break it down into a little bit more detail. Now, I could go very deep on all of these topics. Hey, Lori. I could go very deep on each one of these topics. I want to try to keep these Facebook Lives to a reasonable amount of time. So I'm kind of summarizing them as much as possible in a way that's going to give you some good concepts to focus on, some really good information, but not overwhelm you with a bunch of information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to circle back and I'm going to present a recording of each one of these topics in greater detail. If you really want to dive in and take a deeper and closer look at Eat, Move, Recover, Play, Connect. So today we're going to talk about nutrition, and one of the things that I want to emphasize, there's really one concept that I'm going to focus on more than anything else today. But when it comes to nutrition, I get frustrated sometimes because nutrition conversations seem to always circle around and focus on a couple of key concepts. Number one, how do I make my body smaller? Dieting. And number two, how do I eat in a way that's consistent with my ideology? What's up, Danny? And so I want to try to get away from, in this conversation, talking about dieting and talking about eating styles. And by eating styles, I mean keto, veganism, vegetarianism, paleo, and eating philosophy. Because it seems like every time we talk about nutrition, we're just talking about diets or, veganism versus an omnivore's diet and so on and so forth. Just because a conversation's about food doesn't mean that it's about nutrition. And I personally don't really feel that conversations that focus specifically on weight loss and eating philosophies are necessarily about nutrition. So I want to talk about nutrition. And the first and the major point that I want to talk about today is nutrient density. And the reason that I want to talk about nutrient density is because I think it's the most important concept when it comes to nutrition. It's focusing not on what size is my body, but am I giving my body the nutrients that it needs to optimally perform? Hi, Valentina. Hey, Linda. What's up? So let's talk about nutrient density as a concept. And just so that you know, I actually have some notes here today because otherwise, if I just start going free form, I'll be here all day and I'll keep you here all day, and I don't want to do that. So when it comes to nutrition, the first thing that I want everybody to remember is that we are not biologically adapted to cope with industrialized foods. We're not biologically adapted to cope with simple carbohydrate and sugar, and those are the mainstays of the modern kind of nutritional approach. And as a result, because we take in so much of our food from those simple carb sources, we're just really not getting the kind of nutrients that we need for our bodies to perform optimally. We adapted and evolved for millions of years in an environment in which all we could eat were whole foods, a lot of plants and animals that eat plants. And our bodies adapted to require the nutrients that are derived from those sorts of materials. And we can't get those sorts of nutrients from industrialized food. So I want to talk about nutrient density, and in particular a concept that was coined by Sarah Ballantyne, who is somebody that I have a lot of a high regard for. She's wonderful. She's got an amazing blog called thepaleomom.com. Don't be afraid of the term paleo. It doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. She definitely focuses on ancestral eating, but she's brilliant. She's got some amazing content on her website. But she coined this term nutrivore. And a nutrivore is somebody that really focuses on taking in the most nutrient-dense foods possible so that we can be providing our body with the highest quality and the highest quantity of nutrients so that our bodies will perform with optimal health. The great thing about being a nutrivore and focusing on nutrient density is that it works with whatever particular eating style you embrace. So if you're vegan, if you're vegetarian, if you're an omnivore, if you're keto, if you are paleo, if you focus on intermittent fasting, whatever it is, nutrient density works within the framework of any particular eating style. And something I probably should have said right at the outset is the best way to get a handle on your nutrition is to work with an expert, because nutrition is personalized. There are some general concepts that apply to all of us, but there's also individuality. There's a uniqueness in each one of us, so we need to kind of focus on how nutrition applies to each of us individually. So talking with Stacy Garcia, who heads up our nutrition program, would be a great thing for you to do. Talking to a nutritionist or a registered dietitian would be a great thing for you to do. But just as an overall concept, nutrient density and being a nutrivore is a great thing because it really does apply to whatever sort of eating methodology that you adhere to. And when it comes to being a nutrivore, you're trying to take in a wide spectrum of food that offer the most diverse and beneficial nutrients possible. So when it comes to that, I think of plants first. This doesn't mean that you have to be a vegan. It doesn't mean that you have to be a vegetarian, but thinking plants first. You want to take in a wide variety of plants, of fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, roots, etc., so that you can get a wide spectrum of the nutrients that these plants contain. Plants, and I'm actually reading off a list here so I don't forget anything. They include essential vitamins, vitamin C, carotenoids, polyphenols, flavonoids, plant sterols, fiber, prebiotic fiber, which our gut loves to consume. It's very important for gut health. And so, and I'm actually going to include a link at the end of this that gives you a list, kind of a breakdown of different colored vegetables and fruits and why they benefit us. But we want to be taking in a wide variety and a wide spectrum of colors when it comes to our fruits and vegetables. One of the things that I do in order to make sure that I'm getting a wide variety of plants is I try to turn every meal that I have into an event in which I make sure that I have a yellow, a green, an orange, a red, and a dark colored plant of some kind, like a dark purple or a blue or even a black. And I do that because each of these different colors provides a different spectrum of nutrients. And so it doesn't mean that you just have to be eating veggies and veggies alone, but take the opportunity to make the normal foods that you eat. A lot of the times we get into this conversation about good foods versus bad foods, or healthy foods versus unhealthy foods. And that can be a slippery slope, because then it ends up boiling down to trying to eat only the good foods and staying away from the bad foods. But we're human beings. We're not going to do that. We're going to eat our ice cream. We're going to eat our cheeseburgers. We're going to eat our French fries. We're going to do that kind of thing. But what I recommend is whenever you're eating some of those foods that might not normally be considered the best and most healthy option, is to try to add fruits and veggies to those foods to make sure that they have more nutrient density than they might otherwise have. So for example, on a Sunday morning, my wife and I like to have pancakes. Pancakes, from a nutritional perspective, not great. It's basically just flour and water and eggs and milk and syrup. You gotta have the syrup. So what I do to kind of add some nutrient density to it is I just make sure that I put some blueberries, strawberries, and banana on top of it. 3 different colored fruits, a spectrum of nutrients, and it doesn't necessarily turn an unhealthy food, which I hate using that terminology, into a healthy food. But what it does is it makes sure that I'm getting at least a baseline of plant-based nutrition with that meal. You can do that with pasta. You can do that with pizza. When my wife and I make pizza, we make a vegetarian pizza where we cut up 5 or 6 different types of what's up, Daniela? 5 or 6 different types of veggies and then stack it on top of pizza. I love to do that with eggs, where I'll take 5 or 6 different kinds of veggies and I'll dice it up, and I'll saute the veggies in grass-fed ghee, and then I'll mix those veggies in with a couple of whole eggs. So what I'm getting at is, anytime you're eating a food, you can do that with pasta, pile it with a bunch of vegetables. Anytime that you're taking a food, just try to use it. Anytime you're eating or preparing a food, rather, use that opportunity as a chance for you to introduce a wide variety of vegetables into what you're eating. Smoothies are a great way to do that. Every time I make a smoothie, I make sure that I have some sort of a green leafy vegetable plus something like blueberries or pomegranate seeds and some banana or apple or something like that. So don't miss an opportunity to add fruits and veggies to the normal foods that you eat. So you don't necessarily just have to eat plants, but just make sure that you try to add fruits and veggies to the normal foods that you eat. One thing that makes me crazy is when I'll be looking at somebody on Instagram, and they'll post a picture of their plate of food, and they'll have like their meat, and they'll have some sort of a grain or something, and then they'll have broccoli. Well, broccoli's great, but instead of just having that one vegetable, try having 3 or 4 different types of vegetables so that it gives you that spectrum of diversity. Think of trying to eat 8, 10, 12, 15 different types of fruits and veggies on a daily basis instead of just eating that one serving of broccoli. Try to introduce a greater spectrum of variety to your vegetables, so you're not just eating one. So there's a statistic that I was reading recently where hunter-gatherer tribes typically know up to 100 or more different plants and animals that are food sources. So they have a really encyclopedic knowledge of the foods that exist in their environment. But they're not necessarily eating 50 or 60 or 70 different types of plants and animals on a regular basis, because it all depends upon seasonality and availability and geography. There may be different times of the year where different foods are available and some foods are not available. So with regard to food variety and diversity, just focus on maybe 8 to 10 or 12 different types of plants on a regular basis, and then rotate those plants that you're eating periodically. So maybe every few months you'll introduce, you'll take a couple of the normal veggies off of your rotation, and you'll introduce a few different new ones on. That way, throughout the course of the year, you're really exposing your body to a huge and wide spectrum and diversity of different plants. Cruciferous veggies are great. Those are very, very nutritious. So those are, kale and broccoli, cauliflower, arugula, which I didn't know, turnips. I didn't know that was a cruciferous vegetable. Brussels sprouts, those are great choices to include. Leafy greens like spinach and chard, and then so those would be your green foods primarily, and then just build reds and yellows and oranges and blues and purples around that. Mix it up. So those are the plant-based foods that you would want to focus on when it comes to nutrient density. Now, if you eat animals, this is going to be a little bit controversial because there's this never-ending argument between whether it's healthier to be vegan or vegetarian or whether it's healthier to be omnivorous. I don't want to dig real deeply into that right now, but what I will say is that there is no historical record of any hunter-gatherer tribe in the past or present that was vegetarian. All hunter-gatherer tribes that operated in the natural environment and derived their food from the natural environment did include animal products. There is not a single recorded event of any tribe that was strictly vegetarian or vegan. Now, that's not necessarily meant to tell you what you should or shouldn't eat. It's just interesting to note that, because if that is the case, then our bodies probably adapted over hundreds of thousands of years to animal products and to expect animal products. I don't eat meat. So what I'm telling you runs contrary to what I personally do in my own eating. I don't eat meat. But what I have read, and when I research nutrition, I usually research based upon nutrition and nutrient density. Most of the literature that I read has indicated that the abundance of evidence supports that a plant-focused diet that includes some animal products is the healthiest human diet. Now, I don't want to get into a deep discussion about that. I'm just passing on what I have researched, and I'm not telling you what to eat or what to believe, but that is something that I have uncovered over time, and it's tough for me. It's a bitter pill for me to swallow because I don't eat animals. So I'm kind of eating in a way that I feel is maybe not the ideal or optimum human diet. But typically, traditionally, hunter-gatherer tribes got about 50 to 60% of their calories from animal products. Now, we have to remember that some of that was based upon need. I mean, they operated in a scarcity environment where calories were hard to come by. Animal products had a higher caloric density, and so they would have been a more economical food to consume. We don't live in that environment anymore, so we don't necessarily have the same need to worry about calorie. We don't have at all the need to worry about calorie abundance in the way that people did prior to the agricultural and industrial revolution. So that can kind of inform the way that we eat as well. But typically about 50 to 65% of the calories taken in by hunter-gatherer tribes were animal products. Now, that doesn't mean that the volume of food, that the majority of the volume of food was animal-based. Remember, animal products are much more calorie dense than plant materials are. And so the volume of food that they were taking in was largely made up of plants. But calorically, at least half or a little bit more was made up of animal products. Wherever you fall in this spectrum, whether you choose to eat animals or not, if you're going to eat animals, the first thing to remember is make sure that you are focusing on plants first. So you're taking in a high volume of plant materials, a wide spectrum of plant materials like we already discussed. And then when it comes to eating animal products, the healthiest products to focus on are not necessarily the ones that we would want to eat. Organ meats are the most effective parts of the animal: the liver, the kidneys, the heart. Now, most people are disgusted by that, but it is the most nutrient-dense part of the animal. When I was a kid, my mom made us eat liver and kidneys and all kinds of crazy stuff. She grew up on a farm, so that's what they had to do because they couldn't afford to waste any of the animal. But the most nutrient-rich and nutrient-dense parts of an animal are going to be the organ meats, and bone broth would be a good option as well. So if you have the stomach for it, I would recommend, if you eat animals, to work some liver and some organ meats into your rotation. And if you are going to eat the muscle, if you're going to eat steak and burgers and things, make sure you're eating grass-fed or pasture-raised animals. It's much, much healthier than eating the conventionally farmed animals that most people are eating. But animal products include vitamin B12 and a certain type of iron and zinc and a certain type of vitamin A, and has a very highly bioavailable type of protein, creatine, taurine, carnitine, selenium, a variety of different nutrients that you're not necessarily going to be able to derive from plant materials. So if you're going to eat animals, make sure you're eating for maximum nutrient density, which means to focus on the organ meats and grass-fed and pasture-raised cuts, and then also shellfish and cold water fish, unless you have an allergy. So oysters, mussels, salmon, mackerel, sardines. I eat sardines. My wife thinks I'm disgusting. It's okay. Whatever. I'm not eating it for the taste. I'm eating it because I know it's good for me. Mackerel, even fish eggs, which, listen, I draw the line. Listen, I'm not doing that. But anyway, if you eat shellfish or seafood at all, then those would be good choices from a nutrient density perspective. And then fermented foods. So yogurt and kimchi and kombucha and things of that nature. They're great. The fermented foods have healthy bacteria. Your gut loves them. So that's kind of an overview of nutrient density. Focus on plants first, a ton of them, a wide spectrum of colors, and a wide variety. If you eat animal products, then make sure that you're focusing on the healthier parts of the animal, like the organ meats and pasture-raised and grass-fed meat and cuts. And then work some fermented products into your diet as well. Some other general concepts, because we're already 21 minutes into this and I don't want to go too long, is that I was going to talk about. Oh, this is a perfect time to talk about this. What's up, Amy? Hey, Christina. Is cooking at home, traditional cooking, whatever that looks like. Anytime you're using whole foods, you're going to be taking in a much healthier spectrum of foods than you will be if you're dining out. That's just the way that it is. So when it comes to healthy nutrition, I think a lot of people right now with these stay-at-home or safer-at-home protocols in place are hopefully spending more time cooking than they ever have before, which is a great thing for our health, because traditional cooking is awesome. Cook like your grandma would cook. Cook like your grandma used to cook. So that's another recommendation just from a nutritional perspective. Intermittent fasting is an interesting concept that has a lot of scientific research behind it, but it is a little bit controversial. So this is one that you can kind of think about and do your research on your own. Intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating means that you are going a long period of time during every day without eating, anywhere from about 12 to 16 hours without eating anything. Now, the thing about intermittent fasting is that there is an evolutionary basis for it, because we evolved in an environment of food unpredictability and food scarcity, and it was not uncommon for us to go long periods of time without being able to eat. So it does make sense that our bodies would have adapted to be able to cope with extended periods of time without eating. So a lot of people will restrict the hours that they eat to anywhere from about 8 to 12 hours per day, allowing for a 12 to 16 hour period of time where they're not eating anything at all. Now, be careful with this. Do your own research. There is a large body of evidence that supports the health benefits of this, as far as blood sugar regulation, autophagy, which is your body's cellular cleanup process, weight management. There are a lot of different benefits to a period of fasting, but it can also be tougher for women for a variety of biological reasons. And as Maddie was saying in one of her recent lives that she did on the page here, not necessarily something that you should worry too much about during a period of stress in your life, because it does produce an additional layer of stress for your body, and that can be very, very beneficial. But if you're already struggling with a high level of total biological stress, throwing additional stress on top of that might not be a great thing to do. But you can research intermittent fasting, and I wouldn't get crazy with it. There are some people who only eat one meal a day, or they restrict their eating to a 4-hour window. If you're going to try this, then I would recommend that you are very, very conservative with it. Maybe start with like a 12-hour window of time that you are fasting, so that you don't overdo it at the beginning. But there is a large body of evidence that supports it. Let's see, yeah, so Carrie, you're talking about you've been doing intermittent fasting for 2 weeks. It took some getting used to. It does take some getting used to. One of the things that people talk about primarily when they begin doing intermittent fasting is just that they're starving. Well, yeah, because your body has adapted to being fed at regular intervals. And so that's what your body has come to expect. As you slowly, and I would recommend slowly expanding that window of time, if you're going to do the intermittent fasting, your body will adapt to longer periods of time that you're not eating. I usually do anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day without eating. I'm not telling everybody else that they should do that, but it is something that I think can have some great benefits to it. Do your research on that. That's all I want to talk about for now. So like I said, I'm going to circle back and do a more kind of comprehensive presentation on nutrition that focuses on some of these concepts. But I really just wanted to introduce the concept of being a nutrivore. Being somebody who, instead of worrying about focusing on calories as a unit of measurement, instead of focusing on calories in versus calories out, how do I lose weight? Is veganism healthier than an omnivore diet? Instead of worrying about that, wherever you are and whatever your eating methodology is, just focus on taking in the most nutrient-dense foods that you can, with a wide diversity of food, a wide spectrum of colors. And by doing that, you're likely to crowd out some of the less healthier foods that you normally eat, like the industrialized and highly processed foods. And you may, as a byproduct, your body may actually lose weight in a healthy way, because you're focusing on nutrition first in a way that provides yourself with optimal nutrition. And as a byproduct of that, you may also lose weight. But focus on nutrient density, tons of plants, lots of colors. If you're going to eat meat, eat the organ meats and grass-fed cuts of meat. Fermented foods are great. Cook your meals, prepare your meals at home as much as you can. And lastly, you can take a look into intermittent fasting to decide whether or not the research is convincing enough for you to think about giving it a shot. That is all that I'm going to talk about today. We naturally went a lot longer than I wanted to, because I do that. What can I say? Tomorrow we've got some great things coming up at 9 o'clock in the morning. William Garcia will be doing a great HIIT workout. At 12 o'clock I'm going to be talking with Dr. Karina Schulman, who's a psychiatrist, about managing and maintaining mental health. And we've got some other great things coming on this week. I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate the fact that you're taking an interest in your nutrition. We've got other things coming up. Have a great week. Make sure you stay safe. What's up, Ryan? Thank you very much for stopping by. Make sure you stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.